Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your conference, Growing America's Economy with Energy Efficiency. It is my pleasure to turn the floor over to your host, Glenn Anderson. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining the National Conference of State Legislatures for today's webinar. As mentioned, Growing America's Economy with Energy Efficiency. We also welcome you to join our other upcoming webinars, which you can find at our website at www.ncsl.org. I'll be the moderator today. My name is Glenn Anderson. I'm the Energy Program Manager at NCSL. And today's presenters will be exploring the economic and job creation opportunities that energy efficiency efforts can create for states. And this webinar is being recorded, and registrants will be able to access the recording of the webinar and presentation slides at NCSL's website. But I also wanted to note that you can access and download the presentation right now from the Media Library, which is located at the top of the web page, just to the right of the phone icon. It's a little kind of piece of paper with a triangle on it. So you can have access to the actual presentation, PDF of the presentation right now. We will be sending out a notice right after the webinar with a link to the recorded webinar and the presentation as well. And one thing I wanted to note is that our presenters will be answering questions after the final presentation, so please type in your questions in the question box. It's actually a chat box on the side, on the left side in the lower left-hand corner. And we will be getting to those questions after the final presenter presents. So let me first embark on introducing our first speaker, Maggie Molina. Maggie Molina is Senior Director of Policy at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. She oversees federal, state, and local policy work as well as utility regulation. She conducts energy efficiency programs and policy research and provides technical assistance to a variety of groups. Maggie has authored numerous reports on state policy and utility sector energy efficiency topics, including the first editions of the State Energy Efficiency Scorecard, Energy Efficiency Potential Studies, Utility Business Models, and the Cost of Saved Energy. So let's welcome Maggie to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Glenn. It's great to be here, and thank you to NCSL for inviting me to present on this webinar. So energy efficiency is often thought of as invisible. You know, it's hard to see, it can be hard to measure, but in fact, it's one of our largest energy resources. It plays a very large role in the U.S. economy, and it provides a wealth of benefits. It impacts a range of things in our economy, everything from appliances in our home to buildings and heavy industry in our transportation system. So it plays a large role in our U.S. economy, and I look forward to sharing some of the work that ACEEE has done, some of our research findings on this topic. So I'm going to cover three areas today. First, I'll go over the benefits of energy efficiency and why it's a good investment and a good thing for states to target through public policy. I'll next talk about some of the key types of policies and outcomes of those energy efficiency policies that states can pursue. And finally, I'm going to talk about the energy efficiency workforce. And our second presentation today will go into much more depth on the size and of the efficiency workforce and the types of jobs. If you're not familiar with ACEEE, we're a nonprofit research organization founded in 1980, based in Washington, D.C. We do research and outreach on energy efficiency across a range of topics, from technologies, programs and policies, to behavior, and across all sectors of the economy, from buildings, industry, transportation, and the electric power sector. So first, why energy efficiency? So efficiency is still, on average, our least cost energy resource. So when you look at the cost to save energy, and this chart shows on the left in green, the cost of two utilities to deliver energy efficiency programs, we find that on average they cost about 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So 3 cents per kilowatt hour saved. And when you compare that to the cost to generate electricity from other sources, it's still on average our least cost resource. This is based on a study just published last month. Now, renewable costs have been coming down. There's been a lot of discussion about that in the last couple of years. And in fact, if you look here at the cost of wind and solar, those have fallen dramatically in the last several years. But still, looking at a levelized cost basis, you can see here that efficiency is still on average less expensive. It will vary by region, so that's certainly true, but on average we can see here it's a good investment for states and provides a positive return for energy investments. So that's one of the benefits. This graphic from the Regulatory Assistance Project shows the many layers of the layer cake of benefits from energy efficiency. That top stack looking at the utility system benefits from a utility perspective, in red from a customer or participant benefit perspective, and then finally at the bottom the societal benefits. So the big one under the societal benefits, what we're talking about here today is the job impacts, the economic development. And efficiency really is the backbone of our energy economy, supporting 2.25 million jobs nationally. And these are generally local jobs that directly benefit local communities. Under participant benefits, things like health and comfort. Under utility system benefits, some other ones to flag are lowering risk and improving reliability and resilience of our energy system. And then finally, reducing emissions, improving air quality is very much a societal benefit. Another one is reducing energy burdens, which is the percentage of households' income that goes to pay energy bills. ACEEE has done some research on this topic over the last couple of years and have published a couple of reports looking at energy burdens. The first one here is looking at those in urban areas. We looked at the largest metropolitan statistical areas. And one caveat to note here is in this data that it looks at household energy bills. It does not include transportation costs. So if you were to add transportation costs, that would increase typical energy burdens to customers. The first study here found that energy burdens were about 3 times higher for low-income households than non-low-income households. And then we also looked at rural energy burdens in a study just published a couple of months ago. And we found that on average, median rural household burdens were 4.4% of income, which is 1/3 higher than the national burden and about 40% higher than the metropolitan counterparts. You can see in the regional chart there it does vary by region. We found higher rural burdens in the East, South, Central region, as well as New England and Mid-Atlantic regions as well. Low-income households, as you would expect, have the highest energy burdens among rural households at 9%, which is again about 3 times higher than that of their higher income counterparts. So that's for the median data, but when you look specifically at low-income energy burden quartiles, you quickly see how burdens are much higher for subsets of the low-income sector. In several regions, you can see here burdens exceed 15% for 1 of every 4 low-income households. So energy efficiency plays a key role in helping to alleviate high energy burdens, and again is one of the many benefits of pursuing energy efficiency policies and programs. So that's kind of at the micro household perspective. If we zoom way out and look at the macro perspective, we see another benefit, and that's how the economy has continued to grow and can grow without runaway electricity consumption. This chart is showing electricity usage indexed to 1980 as compared to GDP, and we can see since 1980. And we can see that this has decoupled over time in recent decades, and how we can't, by investing in energy efficiency, and there's been other major structural changes that affect electricity usage, but efficiency is certainly playing a large part in that. electricity usage becoming flat and even declining in some parts of the country. And even so, we continue to see the economy growing through rising GDP. So with all these benefits, some may ask, well, don't consumers and businesses see these benefits and invest in energy efficiency? And in reality, there's been pervasive market failures and barriers that justify the need for energy efficiency policies. I list some of those here, things like imperfect information. Consumers and businesses don't have regular or easy access to information on how they're using energy typically. Things like improved labeling, both appliances, building labeling, and disclosure, better access to energy data information. These are some of the things that efficiency programs can help address, and through policies as well. Split incentives is another common one to point out. How tenants, renters who pay energy bills are not typically the same ones who are making decisions about appliances and equipment in a home. And you have a similar situation for commercial buildings as well. Again, policies can help address that split incentive. Externalities of environmental, health, security costs are not incorporated into energy prices. And then another example here that's a very large barrier is regulatory barriers from monopoly power. And we can get in a little bit to some of the utility sector policies that help address that. Finally, I thought it was worth noting that polling research has found that Americans consistently favor energy conservation over energy production. This is showing since 2002 a poll that Gallup has done asking participants, which of the following approaches to solving the nation's energy problems do you think the U.S. should follow right now? And then comparing production or more conservation. So more conservation has consistently ranked higher. It's been kind of up and down a little bit, but nonetheless, it's consistently ranked higher than more production. So that wraps up kind of the first section on why energy efficiency. Next, I wanted to talk through some of the successful policy progress that we've made and examples of policies. So we did a study a couple of years ago looking at the size of energy efficiency in the electric power sector. So that's one thing to just note here. This is not system or economy-wide. This is just in the electric power sector. So buildings, industry, every part of the economy that uses electricity, but it does not include transportation or non-electricity industry segments. So what we did was we looked at the impacts of three key policies: federal appliance and equipment standards, state level requirements for utility sector investments and efficiency, and building energy codes. And we went back to about 1990 and added up the estimated savings from energy efficiency over time, and found that if you treated energy efficiency as a resource, so if you looked at all those kilowatt hours we saved by investing in demand-side solutions and comparing it to supply-side solutions, efficiency is our third largest resource. And if you put it in the pie, if you literally treat it as a resource, it would be about 18% of energy consumption in currently now. And if we ramp up and continue to invest in energy efficiency over time, we found that it definitely could become our largest resource by 2030 with expanded policies of those three that I just described. So at the third largest resource today, we estimate this is delivering savings of about $460 per year for households and helping to support that large energy efficiency workforce, which we'll get into. So here are many examples. I'm not going to go through these, but I wanted to just give a flavor of the state energy efficiency policies and programs that many states are pursuing and having success with and have been pursuing in some cases since the late 1970s, 1980s, but we've certainly seen a ramp up over the last decade or so with a lot of interest in investments in efficiency. ACEEE has a lot of resources on these various policies. One that I would point out, Glenn mentioned that I have worked on our state energy efficiency scorecard that provides a ranking of states, but it also just gives a nice snapshot of which states are pursuing which policies. And we also have a lot of resources on best practices in these various policies. So didn't intend to get into these, but wanted to give some of the examples that states are pursuing. Just to pick up on one, the first area is utility sector energy efficiency, which has delivered a lot of the benefits to states in energy efficiency progress. One example is setting energy efficiency savings targets. Some states call these efficiency resource standards, but they come in different flavors. About 27 states now have these policies in place, with New Jersey having adopted one just last year. And then I mentioned the ramp up over time. This is our time series data set on utility sector investments in customer side energy efficiency programs, with blue and showing electricity utility programs, and the orange and natural gas. So this shows that ramp up in the last decade or so, now with the utility sector investments totaling about $7.6 billion as of 2016. So third, to get into the energy efficiency workforce development. First, just to know the size of the national energy efficiency workforce, and again, our second presentation is really going to drill down into details and resources to states. So I won't get into the details here, but just to give a snapshot of, for one quarter of 2017, the sector breakdown of energy efficiency employment by industry. One thing I also wanted to note that ACEEE actually finds this assessment to be kind of on the conservative side. Well, it's looking at direct energy efficiency jobs, and one thing to note from that macro perspective that I talked about a moment ago, we also see indirect job benefits from energy efficiency, because customers can spend or invest the money that they save in lower energy bills elsewhere in the economy. So we're also getting that indirect benefit of establishing energy efficiency policies and encouraging those investments. So on workforce development, ACEEE produced a paper last month, Through the Local Government Lens, Developing the Energy Efficiency Workforce. So we did focus on cities in this report, but I would encourage you to check it out. It's a helpful resource on strategies in general for developing the efficiency workforce. While the policies help to grow the workforce, there are a lot of opportunities for strategies to really develop a high quality workforce to meet the needs established by key policies and changes in the economy. So the first thing to think about is key stakeholders to partner with: energy utilities, unions, efficiency industry, support organizations, also academia and other community-based organizations and nonprofits, and weatherization and program providers as well. We looked at a few different categories of workforce development activities, the top one here being just setting goals, and then we looked at examples from cities around the country. So under the goals, we looked at Milwaukee, where they're, for example, aligning efficiency and workforce development goal setting efforts through a specific program with Refresh Milwaukee. Training programs are another category of activity. Vancouver is running this program of training and high performance building center of excellence. And then next we highlighted Boston as an example of promoting or sponsoring some sort of third-party training opportunities, and I'll get into that one in just a second. Job access strategies is the third category of enacting inclusive procurement processes and contracting processes for energy efficiency projects, and we highlighted New Orleans and Portland for those, and some miscellaneous activities as well that states and local governments can pursue, supporting clean energy accelerators and hubs, an example that we saw Los Angeles is doing, and forming community partnerships, and we highlighted a program from Knoxville. So again, I encourage you to check out this resource. Focus on cities. A couple of state examples just to point out. Here's one from New York, an example of partnering with a statewide entity such as NYSERDA and an academic institution, so the State University of New York system. And they created this partnership to both encourage the deployment of clean energy and efficiency at campuses statewide, and also at the same time to prepare a clean energy workforce. SUNY buildings represent 40% of state-owned buildings, so this is really an opportunity for the state to lead by example and at the same time take advantage of leading research facilities at SUNY universities. Another example, and then they established, the partnership was basically establishing an MOU that included curriculum development and training laboratories, creating some hands-on learning opportunities for students, and then supporting the development of facility-wide plans to achieve the New York State's statewide goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. So that goes back to trying to align some of the statewide goal setting processes with workforce development efforts. And then one other example here is through the City University of New York, which offers course credit to participants in a high-performance green building program. That's an example of coordinating with a local union. Now, next example here is Massachusetts, and this is an example of partnering with the utilities I mentioned a moment ago. Eversource and National Grid is partnering with the city to sponsor building operator certification training for municipal building operators. And I think I'm just going to speed up here a little bit just because I'm looking at the time. One other example that I wanted to mention, those examples of workforce development and the report we did in Massachusetts and New York, we're looking at, specifically at those direct jobs. One other thing to keep in mind, as I said, we also can see the indirect job benefits of investing in energy efficiency. And some of the work we do can help analyze the macroeconomic impact through modeling of those investments. So we did some work last year in the state of Maryland where we analyzed the job benefits of investments in energy efficiency, specifically around Maryland's Empower Maryland program, which was enacted back in 2008, and it creates energy efficiency programs that the state's 5 utilities invest in. And the program helps homeowners and businesses save energy through incentives and technical assistance type programs. So we were able to analyze the impact of extending that program's investments out for several years, and estimated that the expanding or extending Empower would create nearly 70,000 net new jobs, increase state GSP, and save nearly $12 billion in lower energy bills for homes and businesses. And we released a report here with some other stakeholders and folks in Maryland who work on these programs and benefit from those programs as well. We released at the Ravens Stadium in Baltimore. So I wanted to give that example as well of how to look at the macroeconomic benefits of energy efficiency. And then finally, just for your resources for you to check out in the PDF, there's some links here to our resources, and wanted to flag a webinar, Efficiency in Rural Communities, that my colleague Mary Shoemaker will be releasing this new report on the 19th of September, and encourage you to check out some specific programs that help reach rural communities that we'll be highlighting in that report and in the webinar. So with that, some quick takeaways. Efficiency is still our least cost energy resource, supports over 2 million jobs, and we'll hear more about that in just a moment. Provides a host of benefits, and states can really play a central role in supporting efficiency policies through workforce development. So thank you very much. Look forward to some questions, and thank you again to NCSL for the opportunity.
All right, thanks, Maggie. That was a great presentation. You covered a tremendous amount of information, and we do have some questions, but we will hold those till the end. We have quite a few questions given the amount of information you presented, and I think we'll have some good discussion after our next presenter. So with that, we will continue with our next presenter, Pat Stanton, who is a nationally recognized expert in regulatory policy analysis and advocacy. Pat works tirelessly to improve public policies related to energy efficiency, renewable energy, and the full range of demand resources, which she can explain further. Among other initiatives, she is leading the Faces of Energy Efficiency campaign. Prior to working at E for the Future, she served as a policy advocacy lead at CSG, led a consulting service for clean energy market participants, and was a deputy commissioner at Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. So let's welcome Pat.
Thank you very much. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Coincidentally, today is the launch publication date for the 2018 Energy Efficiency Jobs in America. So it's a real opportunity to provide you all with the latest information. But I'd like to start with a quick poll to get some idea about what your understanding is about the energy efficiency reports. Well, I think that's excellent. We are, it turns out today is a really great opportunity to provide many of you with your first introduction to these reports, and hopefully it would just be the beginning of a great conversation. Next, we have another question, which is, which of the sectors do you think would have the most employment? And so we have the fuels and production of electric generation, transmission, distribution, storage, and energy efficiency. Those are the kind of three options right now. And which do you think have the highest employment? So that's really we get some interesting mixes. We have about 50% in the fuel production and generation, 15% in transportation and distribution, and about 40% in the energy efficiency. So this gives us an opportunity to look at what the real results are. Can we move the poll? Thank you. So earlier this spring, the U.S. Energy and Employment Report, which looks at employment in all energy sectors, was published. And if you notice that the lowest number of jobs is actually in the production of fuels and in the generation of electricity. So I think this is a little different than the general perception that you folks have. The largest is in all of the transportation, distribution, storage of energy. And energy efficiency is right up there. A lot of jobs in the U.S. are associated with energy efficiency. So just a little bit about how this report is done. This methodology for this report was developed by the Department of Energy and reviewed and approved by the Bureau, Offices of Management and Budget. And it basically uses as its raw data set the Bureau of Labor Statistics data that I'm sure you're familiar with, the broad categories for employment, but they are very few of those categories that are specific to energy. So extensive interviewing of employers, 23,000 interviews of employers across the U.S. were conducted to understand, to further break down the job in employment categories into the various energy subcategories. So 2.25 million energy efficiency jobs is certainly a lot of jobs. But question we always get when we go in to talk to legislators and other policymakers is, what is an energy efficiency job? And so I think it's really interesting that the user methodology shows jobs across in sort of two perspectives. One is your value change from research, mining, manufacturing, sales and distribution, all the way, different types of jobs in that way. Another way of looking at jobs is to say, well, is it in making appliances or lighting or architecture or energy management services? So what are the products and services? And if you were to create a grid with those two perspectives, it's obviously a pretty diverse and distributed and difficult to describe workforce. I spoke with an energy officer from a Midwestern state yesterday, and he described energy efficiency jobs that he had no idea, people working, what you would think of as a startup in, a tech startup doing energy related software. So there's lots of jobs where people are trying to create products and services that will have the owner or building owner or property owner be able to do the same thing but use less energy. So another quick poll. So this is kind of a couple quick questions about what you know about the workforce. So contractors and what, so the question here is, of all the contractors in the U.S., how many of them do you think spend more than half their time doing energy efficiency work? Okay, so we have predominantly on the 5%, most people think around 5%, and then split on the less than 1% or maybe or more than 10%. So we can we'll take after the next question, we'll get a look at what the answers are here. So another important issue for workforce is veterans. And so the question I have for you here is whether the there's a different, there you go, thank you so much, whether you think that energy efficiency, that veterans are more likely or less likely or to be, are more likely, let's say, that was a typo on our part, but say more likely to be in the energy efficiency than in the general workforce. And the results seem to be that you do think that energy efficiency jobs are welcoming to veterans. So let's look at what the results from the user report are. So we're going to look here at the national level data, and it turns out that of the energy efficiency jobs, 60% of the energy efficiency jobs are contractor jobs. So that's really, we kind of can imagine there are people building buildings or repairing buildings. And but the cool thing is that 18% of all construction jobs in the U.S. have workers doing more than spending more than 50% of their time doing energy efficiency work. That's really cool. Another thing that Maggie mentioned was that these jobs are all over the United States. And it turns out there are 3,007 counties in the United States. That's a detail that I did not know. But it turns out that 3,000 of them have energy efficiency jobs. I don't know where the other 7 are, but we'll have to look that up and figure it out. But basically, energy efficiency jobs are everywhere. And finally, energy efficiency industry is quite welcoming to veterans. The average number of veterans in the workforce in the U.S. is about 6%, and it's almost double in the energy efficiency workforce. So now I'm from Massachusetts, so I've chosen the Massachusetts individual fact sheet to give you guys a tour of the state level information that is available for you today on our website, so that you can better understand and also explain to your colleagues the potential for energy efficiency jobs. So we did have the by sector information about supply chain. We've simplified. The lists are a little shorter than the list I showed in the graphic a little earlier, but for each state they'll show how the jobs are distributed. We will also show how many, what percentage of construction jobs in your state are energy efficiency jobs. Massachusetts invests very heavily in energy efficiency, and it's almost 1 in 4 construction jobs in Massachusetts have workers doing more than half their time spent on energy efficiency work. And we're a little below the national average for EE veterans in EE jobs. We're at 10%, but still way above the national average. So that's the first page of our state sheets. The second page shows firm size, and this is really varies. Obviously, each state is different, but by and large, most of the firms that do energy efficiency work are micro firms of fewer than 20 employees. So that's good news, and also presents certain challenges, and there are opportunities for legislators and legislatures to think about different ways to help those small businesses prosper in their communities. We've also included one of our Faces of EE individuals from each state on the state fact sheet, and we'll have a little bit more about our Faces of EE in a minute. And we also have provided a breakdown of the jobs numbers by the congressional districts. So that's helpful if you're talking to your colleagues, your congressional colleagues. You can understand that. We also have them by county, but most important to the audience that we have here today, we have the breakdown by the upper house and the lower house in each state. So you can quickly zoom in and see how many energy efficiency jobs are in your are among your constituents. Then on the last sheet, we have some information about those of us that are published it, a little bit of background information about the research methodology, and a heat map which shows the distribution of energy efficiency jobs as compared to the energy efficiency jobs per 1,000 total workforce. And every state has its unique story, and the story in Massachusetts is really interesting. So we have this small island, Nantucket, off the coast of Massachusetts, and it has it's got a single line that underwater cable that provides electricity to the island, and all of the fuel for vehicles has to be brought in by barge. So energy is a real issue, and the state decided, particularly for electricity, in order to reduce the need for a really expensive new cable out to the island, to make a huge energy efficiency investment in Nantucket, and that investment is reflected by the workers on Nantucket who are installing insulation, working to improve lighting, to improve the heating and air conditioning systems of buildings, and so forth. So as a companion resource to the jobs report, we have launched the Faces of EE campaign, where we've looked to workers in energy efficiency and from different states and asked them how what it means to do their job, and also help them have a voice in policy. So our vision is to deploy content at scale. So we have content in every state, developing high digital content takes some development and planning and doing it at scale. We'll be able to provide to your offices and your colleagues information in a way that is less costly than if one state were to try to do it on their own. We also provide opportunities for workers to know if there's a policy coming up in their state that might affect their jobs or increase the potential benefits for their companies. So we do this through content. We have a website. We have a network of partners and advocates. So we do our best to really support those who are trying to improve the industry for workers. This is a distribution chart of where we have Faces of EE, and I would certainly, any of you that happen to be on the phone from the states in dark red, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe you know some companies or some contacts where we could reach some of the EE workers in your state and improve our Faces of EE collection. And finally, as I mentioned, we do have a website so that anyone can come in and download the various materials. We do have a gated and ask for name and your email, and also for you to recognize that we take very seriously our participants in Faces of EE have generously given us their images and their words, and we take it seriously that we curate those and make sure they're used under the terms of the releases that we receive from our participants. So you can. We do have step-by-step instructions. I'm not going to go through those today, but we will have a PDF that will be posted on the website along with the materials from today, so that you can get on and download materials. They will include the overall U.S. Part of the report, which summarize U.S. job numbers, as well as our Faces of EE for the state, the individual job sheet that I just went over, the 4-page job sheet that I just went over. And also we're putting in various kinds of resources that we think may be useful in your consideration, as you make consideration. And this is similar to the graph that Maggie had before, showing GDP growing along the top here. This again is Massachusetts because it's where I'm from, and showing how that relates to energy use and emissions, which have either remained flat or in some places actually reduced. This is over a 30-year period, so if you would find that looking at how those indicators have performed in your state, you can just go on our website and download that. So we definitely appreciate any feedback on the content that we've developed, and also if there are opportunities you think either state or regional specific presentations that might be useful, and if you would be interested in meeting constituents from the EE workforce, or visit a work site or a workforce training center, we would certainly like to be as helpful as a resource to you as we can be. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Glenn to talk about questions.
All right, thank you, Pat. That was a great overview of your report and a lot of great information there. And we do have some questions for both of you. I think the first one actually is for Maggie. It did come during your presentation, and it's really a question about one of your statements, and I think I have kind of a follow-up explanatory question as well, and it's basically asking, how does monopoly power or gas prevent people from being more energy efficient? And I think that may it kind of disputes whether that statement to some extent, but I'm assuming you're kind of talking about investor-owned utilities.
Right. Yeah, and I should have elaborated.
Yeah, so with regards to maybe they are more likely to be compensated at a higher rate for capital expenditures and sales than they are, and for maybe building new generation than they are for building and selling less.
Right.
Basically.
And this can be a barrier, but many states have addressed this barrier, which is why we've seen strong investments from investor-owned utilities in energy efficiency. So, what I would have elaborated is that the traditional utility business model often encouraged higher sales and more expensive capital investments, but things like integrated resource planning that includes demand-side resources, things like full revenue decoupling and other utility business model changes that encourages utility investment in the demand side addresses that market barrier, and it is more of a kind of broad market barrier than more of a pure market failure that some of the other examples are. So that is a good clarification. And again, most states, not all, but the majority of states, and we track this in our state scorecard, have taken the steps to address those barriers through things like those things I just mentioned, revenue decoupling or utility performance incentives for investments in efficiency or similar types of policies.
Great, thanks. And I guess either of you, depending on your knowledge, feel free to, or both of you, to answer this next question. It looks at the manufacturing side, questions around how much analysis there's been with regards to efficiencies benefits for manufacturing, including combined heat and power, which is basically utilizing waste heat from electricity generation to increase efficiencies dramatically of energy with regards to energy use, and it's often very beneficial in industrial processes. Basically, the statement goes on to say that the focus on buildings seems to be higher in residences, and what do you recommend as experts in this area to kind of help bring more awareness to the advantages of bringing efficiency to the manufacturing sector and to improve the knowledge around CHP?
Sure.
So this.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Pat. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Pat. I'll jump in after you.
One thing is the job numbers here do not include manufacturers. When we talk manufacturing in this job report, it's manufacturing efficient materials like insulation and light bulbs and appliances and those kinds of things. Improving efficiency in the manufacturing of other stuff is actually more jobs that aren't even incorporated in this report. There is a Department of Energy has an awesome collaborative on combined heat and power, and I can be happy to give folks a referral to that program if they're interested. And that's what I've got.
Yeah, so this is Maggie. Absolutely, there's a lot of potential still remaining in the manufacturing sector. And combined heat and power certainly is a great solution. And in fact, a lot of CHP potential we find going forward in large institutions, hospitals, universities, so not just the manufacturing sector, but there's a ton of potential for CHP outside of the manufacturing sector. One of the sections of our state efficiency scorecard looks specifically at combined heat and power policies, and we rank the states on different programs and solutions they're working on to break down those often market barriers to installing CHP. A lot of states, for example, are opening up their utility efficiency programs to include combined heat and power systems, or through other non-utility program opportunities. Addressing things like streamlined interconnection standards is another opportunity for CHP. So if you're interested in what states can do on CHP, please reach out. I'd love to be in touch, and the state scorecard would be a great resource. And then for manufacturing efficiency opportunities more broadly, Pat just mentioned the work at DOE. We certainly partner often with the Advanced Manufacturing Office at DOE. There's a lot of great programs at the federal level, things like the Industrial Assessment Centers, the IACs. Several states host an IAC, which is a DOE-funded program that allows, and it kind of ties into our workforce development theme today nicely as well, because those centers help to train students on energy efficiency in the industrial sector specifically. So those are a couple of things. We're certainly doing a lot of thinking around how to tap into that large potential in the industrial sector, because you're absolutely right. There is still quite a bit there to do, and some good programs at the federal level and some good things on CHP that states can invest in for sure.
Thank you. And just to note that we will be sending out an email and recording of the presentation within maybe a few days, usually. So you will get that information, and you can, as I mentioned, download the presentation. For folks who weren't on the line when I introduced or when we kicked off the webinar, you can download the presentation right now from the icon at the top. It's just to the right of the phone icon, the media library, and it's a little piece of paper with a triangle. And so feel free to do that at any time as well, but we will have a recording of the webinar available as well. So we do have a few more questions here, and we still have a little bit of time left, so hopefully we can get through these. The next one is regarding the workforce training requirements and what the actual outcomes of workforce development programs are, and what they might accomplish for, beyond just for utilities and efficiency. Are there challenges with finding trained workers is a question, and are there incentives, for instance, state making incentives to basically encourage energy efficiency companies to relocate or to move to certain states or localities?
So this is Pat. I will take the first part of that question in that so there's an interesting conundrum with energy efficiency jobs. If you recall, in the Massachusetts case, that well over 2/3 of all the companies doing energy efficiency in the state have fewer than 20 employees. So the potential for the companies actually doing internal professional development, which is one part of workforce training, is really a problem. So training, increasing the skills of existing workers is a real challenge for these small businesses, and having good programs in community colleges and so forth can be extremely beneficial. Another part of workforce development is taking people with reasonable skills who've been in other parts of other industries and helping them get skills and certifications needed so that they can get into energy efficiency, particularly contractors who haven't done energy efficiency, construction workers. They may need to get a certain certification to be able to handle blown-in insulation or something like that. And helping with that, I think that there's opportunities to work both with companies and manufacturers of those products, as well as, again, community colleges and others. And then there's the toughest one, of course, is always helping workers or potential workers who have barriers, education barriers or history of drug or quarry issues, and helping them get into the workforce. Again, there's real opportunities for state governments to work with and particularly to facilitate cooperation and discussion among potential employers and potential workers. The really good news is energy efficiency employers projected more growth than any other energy sector. There's a need for workers, but we have this challenge that many of the jobs are located in very small companies, and so there's a real opportunity for government to be helpful.
Yep, I absolutely agree on the point of our companies having trouble finding trained workforce. I would just add, we haven't looked at this specifically in any of our research, but we have heard anecdotally, at least from a couple of states, some of the challenges they're having in finding trained workforce in certain areas. So going back to that need for good workforce development and training programs. The other example where we've heard this come up is in our research and outreach on advanced buildings. There's been a lot of evolution in the types of technologies that high-efficiency buildings use, things like sensors and controls and just advanced building systems. And in our most recent research on advanced buildings, one thing we heard again and again is the need for better training for building operators as the technology evolves. So a lot of areas and opportunities for states to help support that workforce development.
Thank you. And we have one final question, if you wouldn't mind keeping your answers brief in response, since we are going over the hour slightly. This question is there anything focused on relative economic return to the states in terms of GDP or other measures? For instance, it would take into account the financial benefits of energy efficiency to manufacturing or to other sectors, for example.
This is Maggie. That's a great question, and that study that I mentioned we did in Maryland looked at exactly that. It is going to vary by state. So, some sort of national average we do not have, and perhaps that wouldn't be as meaningful as a state-specific analysis. But, in general, definitely positive economic returns, but it will vary by the state's economic mix and other factors.
Pat, this is Pat. Yeah, just one quick thing is the RGGI states, the Northeast states that have had the Greenhouse Gas Initiative for almost 10 years. So as a result of that, the states have money to invest from the sale of allowances. And there's been economic studies done on alternative ways that the states can invest that money, and looking at the economic return to the state. and by far energy efficiency compared to investing, giving the money back to ratepayers, or giving the money back to the generators who had to pay the money in the first place to get the allowances, or investing in some of the renewables. In every case, energy efficiency did a better return, and that's the real basic of that is not only do you get the return of the initial investment and the workforce that do the initial work and construction, but then you have people who have buildings where that work has happened. The owners of those buildings have money in their pocket because they're not spending money buying electricity or buying natural gas, and they spend that money on other things in the economy, and that multiplier effect of both the savings and the initial construction work mean energy efficiency always has had a better return than the other options the policymakers in those states considered or actually implemented.
Thank you. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up, and we want to give a big thanks to both of our speakers, Pat and Maggie, who took time to share their wealth of knowledge with us. And I wanted to mention that NCSL does quite a bit of research on energy efficiency, a lot of legislative tracking. We have reports and are happy to do any type of legislative research for our constituents that they might need as well. So feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we'll be happy to help on any of the policies related to efficiency or other energy areas. And as I mentioned, we will have the presentation slides available and the recording within a few days at our website. So we look forward to